D7 bishop is loose.
Now E6.
You can also take the rook, but bishop takes F5, and that is not as easy as you would think.
Okay, this is still completely winning. The bishop simply blockades the pawns, and now E6 is still a threat. The rook is also hanging. Somehow Magnus is still alive.
He's protecting his bishop, and now rook C1 becomes an idea for black. E6 is a good one.
The guy never dies.
He never does. Rook C1, again, is on the agenda, but E7 is what white has.
But how is it that Vidit suddenly has to calculate variations? He's down to 10 seconds. Rook C1 is a threat. Then rook takes B1 and rook D1. Now, wait a second. Rook A1?
Queen C5 check.
And E7?
E7. E7 should finally do it.
Rook E7 and bishop D3. Bishop B5.
Queen takes B5. Whoa.
Whoa.
Wait, king takes D1, B1, queen? 92.
Rook E7.
Oh my gosh, rook E7.
And
white has 200 pieces for a rook. Is there a checkmate? Is there going to be a game over at any point here?
I think that you can trade queens. Probably that's the simplest with 3 seconds on the clock. But can you even trade queens? And where does black's king escape to? Yes, you can. You can force the queen
B6,
trade.
Bishop A6, trade queens. Great call by you and great execution from Vidit. Now he is easily winning, I would think, but it's never easy when you're playing against Magnus.
Now Magnus is going to find some sort of stalemate. He's going to tuck his king over to H4, and he's going to give up his rook, and it's suddenly going to be stalemate. Just watch.
This is well done, though. D7, and I think we're not going to get any kind of stalemate. This looks like game over.
All credit to Vidit. He played amazingly. He kept his composure. But how long did Magnus survive in that game? I would have resigned that about 40 moves ago, and I'm a late resigner.
Wait. You see Magnus? Vidit just won. Now Vidit somehow was given white again. That is a mistake. You see Magnus recognizing it. Of course, a team is going to restart the game where Magnus gets white. Time will be added to the match clock. But yeah, look at Magnus. He's like, what's going on here? Why would I possibly get the second move?
Hold on, girl. He's like, no, I want the white piece now. Great win by Vidit. That experiment in the Guimard did not work out for Magnus Carlsen. It was bad, really, from the first moves. Vidit knew exactly how to respond to that sideline.
Yes, Vidit played an exceptional game. He broke through with that F4, F5, and that has cut the lead back to 3. And we saw the pre-match predictions done here. Everybody had Magnus Carlsen winning 98% of people. The Smarter Chess predictions at 20-8 was be the final score. That still may be the case. But it's not like Vidit got a few free points at the end. Right now, he is really keeping things close.
He absolutely is. And there's some intermediate steps, some hoops you have to jump through if you want to score the upset of the millennium. The first is ensure that it's not a blowout. Sow the seeds of doubt and the seeds of frustration into the mind of the stronger player, which I think Vidit is doing. Magnus has shown a little bit of frustration, irritation perhaps, with some of the games that he's left on the table. And of course, the second step is to make sure that you stay within 3 or preferably even 2 or 1 going into the bullet segment.
Okay, well, Vidit is within 3 at the moment. We do have a London system out of the gates in this game, and Magnus keeps going back to this. So he likes the London. It was played in the World Championship match that he did not take part in Dingley Ren against Jan Nepomniachtchi. But when you look at this Queen B3 stuff again, what do you make of this, and whose position would you rather have?
Yeah, this is a bit of a sterile line. It's a line in which it's hard to say which side plays where. Like on the one hand, sometimes white plays B3, but if black's rook is on C8, then you don't want to play B3. Both sides can play in the center, like white can prepare E4, black can prepare E5. So I'll be honest, I don't really understand these types of positions. I don't know exactly who's playing for the advantage. As a kid, I would probably choose black because of the space advantage on the queen side. But the computer always seems to assign a slight edge to white here.
Sorry, I got distracted by the featured chat. There's only one player who is better than Magnus in endgames, and that is table-based. That's
the famous grandmaster, John Tablebase.
That was a really good one. So in this position, we don't have an endgame. In fact, we've had 0 pieces traded. It's all locked up here. White may try to go for E4, especially if they move rook E1, and black may play for B4. but you can't play rook b8. That's the one thing holding black back, is that bishop on f4 is a nuisance.
And you don't want to play b4 prematurely. That walks into the very thematic tactic. Knight d takes c4, and the knight on c6 is loose. And that is exactly what Carlsen is trying to set up. Vidit says, I wasn't born yesterday. He goes a6, leading to our first trade of the game on move 17.
And the bishop slides it up to e5. We may see the off the board, but bishop takes f6, followed by e4. That's one of the key ideas for white. And for Vidit, the question is, do you plug the square with your own knight?
I think you can also try to jump the gun here, well, in a good way, with bishop d3. And the point is that after bishop f6, e4 doesn't come with tempo anymore, so you would have had time to play e6. But Vidit doesn't seem to care. He allows bishop takes f6, and I don't see any other ideas, any other active ideas for Magnus other than to trade on f6. So whether it's good or bad, you kind of have to do it, I think.
And I think bishop f6, e4, he won't take on e4. Many of us would be tempted. We're about to see this happen. I think after e4 is played, black will play bishop to e6 back to defend the d5 pawn in that way and say, you're going to trade on my terms.
If he wants to take on e4, then probably he should recapture on f6 with the queen. That seems to be a better version of d takes e4. He could still play bishop e6. No, he does take on e4. And will we get, no, we will not get a knight versus bishop situation. We will get a bishop pair for black. I like Magnus's position, though. I think he's slightly better now.
He is, because he's got control over the A file. He has a knight compared to that bishop on g7, which is staring into a brick wall. And rook c7 was played. I probably wouldn't trade pieces if I'm Magnus. I like bringing the rook back somewhere. Oh, it was queen a1.
He's trading on his own terms. But is the queen on a7 really all that worthwhile?
Well, Vidit says no, but why not? It looks pretty good for white because 24 covers that a8 square.
I really like bishop f6. It overprotects the e7 pawn so that the other bishop could move, and then the queen could potentially dive into f4. King g7, another great prophylactic move, bringing the king to a safer spot, moving it away from the 8th rank. Is Magnus setting up for rook a6 here? And what is his response then to queen f4?
Ooh, queen f4 with the bishop hanging on e4,
Yeah.
queen c1 check.
Ugh.
It might lead to a repetition, but also some big problems for white. And is black going to play g5, g4? That's a big question if you go on the offensive.
It feels like Magnus has gone astray in the last couple of moves. I think he put too much stock into his queenside play, but there's nothing to attack on that side of the board. There's nothing on the A file. So when you play rook a6 and your pieces get stranded and gummied up on the queen side like that, your king starts to experience major discomfort. Really like the way that Vidit has set up his pieces on the king side. His king feels really impervious, surrounded by his faithful bodyguard, the f6 bishop.
Looks impossible to get after that king. Queen f4 looks quite natural, but maybe Magnus has bishop c6 planned, where he trades the light square bishops, and that's what Vidit's concerned about. The b5 pawn will be loose. The bishop on f6 looks worse than that knight on f3. So I wonder if Vidit will go forward with queen to f4. I would not trade queens, that's for sure, but what else is there?
Great call, and that's definitely the reason he stepped back to c7 to keep the c6 square protected. Now, don't go back to d6 and blunder the rook. That's an easy blunder to make. Queen c8 might allow knight e5, and so Vidit decides to change up the nature of the position to what I'm sure is Magnus's great relief. Now he no longer has to worry about the safety of his own king, and once again, it feels like white's position might be a little bit preferable.
And look at this, g3. Magnus is trying to provoke Vidit into taking that pawn and losing b5. Vidit says, no, thank you. I need to keep that pawn. He can play rook b8 in the near future, play for b4 at the right moment. But as soon as you play b4, that c4 pawn is loose.
And that knight is jumping around like a fish out of water, except it's quite a bit more dangerous than a fish out of water. It feels right at home, in fact, in this type of position where you can chisel away at some of black's weaknesses. But look at Vidit expanding on the king side, maybe bringing his king up toward the center. 20 seconds on the clock. That's my greatest concern for Vidit, is his clock situation.
And he plays f4. So, wow, rook a7 is a pin on the 7th rank. The king escapes that. Well, the king's in the center now. I feel like Vidit has accomplished something.
Okay, but so has Magnus in terms of centralizing his knight. Things getting very tactical. Bishop c1 tying itself down to the pawn on b2. Does Magnus calmly play b3? Or does he seek tactical complications with bishop e6?
I
Or
like
something
b3
of that
because
sort.
yeah, bishop e6 is the type of move you want to play, but it actually doesn't carry any sort of huge threat. So b3 seems to offer a trade. Then after the swap, bishop b2 for black anyway. c3 is loose. I feel like Vidit is handling this very well. That under 20-second, that is the thing that is worrisome.
Bishop to c6, which is essentially the same as bishop to e6. We might get a trade on d7, and knight takes b5. And that, I think, likely will lead to a draw.
It should. And we see a swap, rook to b8 now, or maybe rook d5. He was the more active move.
Great call.
Everything's coming off the board.
Yep, we're going to get liquidation. And Magnus has to find suitable arrangements for his knight, but that knight has plenty of squares. It's essentially a dead draw once this knight evacuates back to white side of the board, which it just did.
And g3, is he going to take it? No, he's too smart for that because you could take it and that's a theoretical draw, but that also will waste a lot of time off the match clock. And a big question for you, Danya, is does Vidit want another 3-1 game or would he rather get straight to the bullet?
It feels like Magnus has been really at home in this game. And I think Magnus is the one who wants as many 3+1 games as possible because Bullet is very unpredictable. You just never know how it's going to go. You could be the greatest bullet player in the world, and something could go wrong on that particular day. I think Magnus wants to build up the maximum cushion going into the bullet, which is, I don't know, maybe not. He's shuffling his pieces back and forth.
Just going to see
not.
a draw by the 50 move rule, I imagine, unless he plays g5. That's the only way to avoid the draw. But then the black bishop will take that pawn when it gets there. So this is a time-wasting strategy from Magnus. It's perfectly acceptable. It's part of the rules, and we've seen players like Hikaru use it to their advantage, so why not Magnus? And now Vidit gets the white pieces done, and this is probably the final blitz game of the match. If Vidit can win this, he'll only be down by 2 points, and he will have a legitimate shot at the world #1.
Huge game. Just think about the difference between a 4-point match and a 2-point match. It's night and day. Can Vidit step up to the plate? He's got the white pieces. He's got a Ruy Lopez that he's felt comfortable and increasingly comfortable in the last couple of years. Let's see what he can bring to the table against one of the premier experts from the black side in Magnus Carlsen.
And look at this position. There's an open A file. So white's rook on the queen side is probably the best piece on the board, at least relative to its counterpart. But black plays this solidly. You have an open file. So what? What are you going to attack over there? I think that white needs to trade a few pieces. We see the start of that with that knight to d5. But then this reminds me of a certain world championship match, not Ding versus Nepo, but Magnus versus Nepo.
Yeah, I don't remember that match very well. Who won that match? Was it Nepo? Yeah, it's kind of hazy in my mind. But look at just the comfort level that Magnus is displaying in all of these Ruy Lopez structure. He knows exactly where the pieces belong, when they should get there. And I already think that he solved most of his opening problems. Vidit trying to institute some more problems with d4. And we're going to get something really tactical here as Magnus immediately trades on d4. What do you make of this committal decision? And how is white going to recapture?
If you take the pawn, black plays c5. And this is, I think, what we're about to see. Where now black can claim, I'm up a pawn on the queen side. You're up a pawn as white in the center. And this is why I try to avoid saying it's even material. I think that doesn't explain things very well. But black has mobile pawns on the queen side. White has stuck pawn in the center.
And I've harped on this before, but this is once again kind of like a Benoni structure. You get this out of a modern Benoni, and a lot of the evaluation in such position hinges on who controls the e5 square, who controls, this dark color complex along the long diagonal. That answer is very, very clear. It is clearly Magnus Carlsen. He's aiming at b2. His knight can jump to f4 or to e5, and the bishop on f8 later on in the game can join society via e7 and f6 once the queen moves, of course. I really like the way Magnus is handling this.
If white plays queen c2 at some point, bishop takes h3 is also available. So you have to be careful in all directions. b3 was a smart move. That pawn was under attack. You can place a bishop on c4 at the right moment to stabilize. Now I think that white should play bishop c4 and say, well, what weaknesses do I really have?
But this bishop b7, bishop f6 maneuver, it's now become a reality and perhaps even an immediate reality as Magnus tries to find a way to wrest control of the A file from white, right? If white trades on A8, which he just did, that's a major, major concession that Vidit has just made for free. And he is trying to cover all of the important infiltration squares down the A file. But look at Magnus clamping down on the F4 square, preparing to fianchetto his bishop. He is completely in command of this game right now.
That move definitely deserved that exclamation point because you're pointing out bishop e7 to f6. He says, I'll go to the same diagonal, but let me take control of that f4 square. So is white going to be able to play f4? I don't think it's so easy. Bishop g7, f4, there's always a queen d4 check to throw in. The white king also gets in some danger, and the open A file is clearly a good thing for black.
Absolutely, and that is why Vidit taps into his only active resource, that is the move f2, f4, which he is trying to shove through, even in the face of black's clamp. F4 will open up the F file. I think Vidit is doing everything he has to do to generate active counterplay. But look at Magnus shutting down the king side. In comes the rook in so many different lines. White's position is on the cusp of total collapse.
It was such a calm start to the game, and now white's king looks a bit open. That bishop on g4, it is kind of in danger of being trapped in some positions, but white doesn't have another pawn to attack it with. Like if you played f5 for white, you give up the dark squares, but you trap that bishop in there. You just don't have a pawn going to h3 after that.
That's a great point. That would have made all the difference. The presence of h3, g4 would have made it a very dangerous idea indeed. And this is where Vidit, I think, is going to pay the price for giving up the A file. I think it's a perfect opportunity to involve the rook via a1, pinning bishop to the other rook, and creating threats on all sides of the board. Of course, technically, white could move the bishop in response to that, but man, rook a2.
Whoa.
No, he didn't. Sacking the exchange.
That is sick. He gives up his rook for the bishop because the bishop protects so many important pawns and squares. Wow, what a find by Max there.
Can I say that is sexy? And it is also the best move because the rook is hanging, the pawn falls, the other pawn falls, and the white king is going to get caught in a massive attack orchestrated by all of black's pieces put together. I would just grab e4 and enjoy my life here if I'm Magnus Carlsen.
Whew, what a move Rook A2 was.
A2. Oh.
And how easy is this position? Because the eval bar is saying that black is clearly for choice. But what's the follow-up? It is right now a bishop and one pawn for rook. Even if you steal that second pawn, as he did, this doesn't seem straightforward.
Man, if I had this position against Magnus with white in a classical game, I might have had to hit the bar after the game. It just feels like there's no hope for white because b3 is also likely to fall. Vidit clinging to that pawn with all that he has left. Rook e3 is actually a great move because the rook can also swing over to g3, and that is the way in which white engineers some counterplay. That king on h7, not feeling too comfortable. And look at Vidit forcing this bishop away so that the queen can try to infiltrate via e8. Not over yet.
And if that queen gets to the last rank, suddenly the black king is in huge trouble. But after queen a2, he goes right back. He wants to keep the b3 pawn defended. I think that's much needed in this position because you can't allow black's pawns to start running up the board.
Now, obviously, black has a draw in his pocket. That's not the question, right? There's queen d1, queen h5, there's queen e4. Anything draws. How does black nail the final nail in the coffin here in terms of getting to this b3 pawn or getting to white's king? Maybe a move like h5, maybe covering the g file with bishop g6, but those are pretty hard moves to play because they're kind of amorphous. And Magnus investing most of his time advantage into calculating c4. Here we go.
He gave away most of his objective advantage as well, but he wants to push his passed pawn. But white goes queen a8, and watch out for queen g8 checkmate.
But don't go queen a7. He plays the right move. It's the only good square for the queen. There's a draw in Magnus's pocket, but will he go bishop g6 and take the plunge? No,
Isn't
the bishop is hanging.
Yeah, we both.
I think he might have forgotten about that.
And then there's b2, so that does keep the position very interesting. But is the white rook even able to stop that pawn?
Because rook b3 walks into a fork on d1. I would play bishop g6 here. I don't see a move for white.
But there's bishop d4 at the end of that variation, I think.
Oh my gosh! And there's queen h8 mate. What's going on here?
What is happening? He does get a queen, but now it's an extra pawn for black, but opposite colored bishops that should leave white in a position where you can draw, but don't play bishop d4 now because queen f4 check.
I was going to say still a little bit of work to do for Vidit, but he has done that work and he has held the draw. A huge result for Vidit. Improbable. And Magnus exasperated there despite the brilliant exchange sacrifice, despite the heroics in the opening. He can't pull out the win, and he will have to satisfy himself with a 3-point lead going into the bullet. This, Robert, is a close match.
It is indeed. 3 points separate these two. And Magnus, he expects the most from himself. He did probably expect that Vidit would be a fighter, but 10-7, I don't think our community could have expected this. This going into the bullet really gives Vidit a legitimate shot.
Dude, Vidit is playing out of his mind. Yes, he's down 3 points against Magnus, but the fact that he's in this match going into the bullet, the fact that he has, as I put it at the start of this segment, a fighting chance tells you all you need to know about the kind of effort and the kind of resilience that we have seen from Vidit today. Can he cap off an incredible comeback in the bullet, or will Magnus continue to do Magnus things? Well, I guess there's only one way to find out, isn't there?
There is, but the players, they'll get a much-needed break before the action continues. We'll do the same, but before we get to our break, I want to give a shout-out to